Hey again. It's June 3rd, 2024. It is just about 12:15 p.m. in the afternoon. And yeah, it's a pretty nice day out. A little bit hot by some standards, but you know me, I personally like it a little bit hotter, on the hotter side myself. At the very least, I like it when it's kind of like this. It's a little, just a teensy bit humid, but not too bad. But it seems like most of the heat is radiating from the sun, which that's my favorite kind of heat. Um, it's fairly cloudy out, but it's surprisingly sunny. Um, Now that I say that, now it's getting shady, a little bit shady, I guess. But it's a nice day. And I don't know. I just wanted to talk a little bit, mostly after watching one of Post Nostalgos's recent videos. I think he probably uploaded either, might have been today or the day before today or whatever, yesterday. He talked about a bunch of interesting stuff, or at least stuff that, got me thinking or reminded me of certain things or whatever. But specifically the thing that I think I had the most to kind of have input about or talk about was what was it? Kind of the fact that these these companies, these companies, big, small, mostly the bigger ones, I guess, medium size. So most companies that you know about or you've worked for, or whatever, they kind of like everybody. Maybe it's just become this, or maybe it was always this to some extent. I'm sure to a degree it's gotten worse, if you want to call it that or whatever. It's gotten more significant, the issue, I guess you could say. At least the issue for actual people or whatever, like us to some extent, stuff that we notice, is that people become more, or the people that work for these companies, the people that are supposed to be providing a service, doing a thing, they become more and more, seemingly, or it's just become, like, to an absurd degree, more incompetent, or the service itself just becomes worse. The workers become less helpful or become less trained or whatever. They just seem more incompetent, stupid, or whatever you want to say. And I guess I just wanted to have some input on that from my own, lived experience. That I don't know why I don't like that term, even though I guess it's a decent way to word that or whatever. But from my lived experience, I don't know why I don't like that. It just sounds kind of silly. But from my own lived experience, as well as my perception of other people's lived experiences, like, my taking in of them talking about it, and trying to convey it through myself again or whatever. Yeah, I guess I'll talk a little bit about that and what I've experienced, what I've seen. But this was probably something, I guess I could even, I can't trace it back to when I was too young, because at least when I was so young, I was very, I wouldn't say I was completely unperceptive of certain things, but I was definitely much less so than I am now, obviously. But I guess I noticed from when I was in school and stuff, I would see that just in the teaching staff and stuff, and then I realized later on, like, how useless the whole education system is, at least, especially the public education system, especially. I mean, I think all of it to some extent is pretty fucking useless, but especially the U.S. public education system. That's the perspective I'm coming from. You know, basically completely useless for the most part. The teachers, they complain about everything, even though they get significantly more, like, for how little they're working, like, they get, like, 2 or 3 months time off, which I don't know if they get. I never even really considered that. I don't even know if they get vacation time necessarily that they can use whenever, but they all get vacation at the time that almost like seasonal work. They get vacation time when the summer vacation and all that. Unless they go and work another job or whatever. But they would always complain about that shit, saying that they don't get paid enough, and it's like, well, you kind of do, considering all things considered, you do. I mean, and then just so many other things, like aspects of incompetence that you'd see in these, like, teachers, and even when I went to college, these professors, like, people that can't do, as the saying goes, those that can't do, teach. And that's a lot of what I saw. I'm not saying all the time that was how it was, but that was most of the time that was what I experienced. But that was just one thing. Now, it really comes when I talk about my dad's, especially more recent, since I've been talking to him. He's been talking about this stuff more, and I've been talking to him more about these things, about when he goes to work and his job and stuff, and his complaints and the people he works with and everything, as well as obviously my own experience when I was working for a few years there, a few years back. And I guess I'll start with when I was at that wasn't my first job. My first job, I guess, was actually working in the same place that my dad did, this distribution center, this alcohol distribution warehouse or whatever, I don't know if in other states, I didn't even know this, that I guess that's a thing that's kind of not necessarily exclusive to Jersey, but it's one of those things that Matt recently mentioned, which I found funny, is that, like, there's these special laws where the laws are all bullshit anyway, but, most people, the downloaded go by the laws and all that crap, and they care about them, even though they don't mean anything, really. But that, the suppliers or makers, whatever, people that, the entities that own these brands, like Tito, or Saveca, or, of course, now I can't, all these alcohol brands, these fucking thousands of ridiculous alcohol brands, they can't directly sell their product to their customers, or in this case it would be the, like, liquor stores and stuff. They can't have their own places ship directly to them, kind of like when you see a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi truck or whatever shit. They can't do that, I guess. So, at least in Jersey, I guess. So they have to go through the middlemen distribution centers, like, such as my dad, he works for. He's a forklift driver. He's not one of these, like, fucking higher ups or whatever bullshit for them. He just drives a forklift. But these distribution centers, they're just the middlemen, and all they do is just take. Basically, they're like the almost like the mafia in a sense of getting the alcohol to these places, because they need to get their cut before they need to get their cut before the people can get their fucking bullshit product, basically. But yeah, that little tangent aside, I worked there for a little while, just like any job, and especially my first job, it sucked. But I wasn't there too long after Hurricane Sandy fucked up the entire place, and then they weren't really calling me to come back, and I was basically telling my dad, I'm like, I was pretty much like, yeah, you know what, I'm fine with that, fuck this place. And I think I worked for the school after that, where my mom was working in the lunch, the child nutrition, I guess they would call it. That'd be the quote-unquote the official term. But I worked with them in that for a very short spat, and then I went to college for a little bit. Yeah, and that's what happened. And then I went to L'Oreal after I got the job from college. I got the job in L'Oreal while I was doing college. And not knowing that that they were getting like some government funded bullshit for having a student, so they really didn't give a shit about me actually working necessarily. They just gave a shit about me being a student mostly. But that's a different story. But and it's funny with the nepotism that was being talked about in Stardust Simulation, or Billy's stuff as well on this topic, the nepotism, is that the first two jobs I had were in the warehouse in the company that my dad worked for, so that's not too surprising. And then the second job was the school system, or I wasn't working with her, kind of, thank God, thank goodness, but I was working in the same system that my mom was working in for a little while. But then after that, all the other companies I worked with were no nepotism, technically. I was completely outside of the family or whatever. You'd kind of say, like, I didn't have any connections before that with those companies and stuff. And that's where I learned the most. I mean, I learned a lot from all of them in terms of just how bullshit the entire system is, but I learned the most when I was on my own, and I had to make my own observations. I had to experience my own kind of my own issues on my own terms or whatever, without somebody, being in the sideline to kind of sideswipe that, I guess you could say. But not that it really happened in the other places either. But I experienced them completely from my own viewpoint. And L'Oreal, I mean, this is what I noticed in all the places. Like, that I was a maintenance mechanic. That was my job title and all that kind of stuff, which, title doesn't really mean shit. I just kind of did whatever they needed me to do, which was, in this case, mostly maintenance-related stuff. Hooking up tanks, unhooking tanks, bringing the equipment to the cleaning area. Sometimes I usually didn't clean it myself because they had a guy that did that, but sometimes. And just various other BS. Looking at the machines, watching them, and I didn't really fix anything, honestly, but that was in the job description, I'm sure. But yeah, like, even the guys that were and this was technically a place that had a union and everything, so there was, that whole bullshit political system in that situation, obviously. And I was technically in the union, but all the unions are all fucking bullshit anyway. And in the end, they didn't even help me when they fired me or whatever. They didn't help me any. So, what the hell's the fucking point? But so I was technically in the union and all that shit. But no, just throughout the entire place, when I really think about it, there was just so much incompetence. There was always, like, so many people that were just doing their thing, their routine or whatever, like, and then anytime they would go outside of that, they would have no clue, or they would just bullshit you to act like they have a clue, but they really don't. And especially the supervisors and stuff, like, they didn't know anything. I mean, like, some of them did. They were probably there for, like, their whole fucking lives, like, 30 years, 40 years, whatever. Sure. They still didn't really know much. You know, their entire job was just kind of, like, to be bullshitters. And that's kind of a lot of the point I'm trying to get to here, is that there is that obvious pattern that you see, where that these people that are in these supposed positions of power, which there isn't any power, really. It's, you know, it's a facade of power. It's a facade of power that these people have in these little supervisor and managerial positions and stuff. But almost every one of them was completely incompetent when you actually, like, got down to it. Outside, when you saw through their little bullshit thing, facade that they were putting on, they didn't know anything. They didn't know how to do anything. They weren't really useful. They were just kind of there, being there. And I'll kind of use that to transition to, because this is kind of the main point I was trying to make. When I left that place and I was on unemployment for a little while, I got another job eventually at an Amazon facility, and an Amazon fulfillment center, or whatever their stupid name for it was. But it technically wasn't directly for Amazon. It was through a, what would they call that? A contractor for Amazon. Yeah, like a third-party contractor company that worked for Amazon, which basically did almost all of their maintenance and, like, regular maintenance and, like, upkeep work. That being JLL, which JLL is actually this giant, like, stupidly giant, like, real estate agency or whatever kind of thing. Like, they own shit tons of fucking land and everything. That's their main thing. But for whatever reason, they also have a good amount of their company in, like, facility maintenance and stuff. But yeah, when I worked there, I would just see it everywhere. And in this one, it was interesting because the facility in question that I was working for was completely brand new. So everybody there, for the most part, was kind of, like, at least in this facility, was starting fresh, or, like, completely, like, there was no hierarchy already there when I arrived. So it was basically everybody had to kind of make their own name, I guess you could say. It sounds stupid when I say that, but, like, yeah, they had to kind of prove themselves without any other bullshit like unions or any of that crap getting in the way initially. It was like everybody was just kind of on an even footing initially in that sense. So that was very interesting to see, and I definitely liked it the best that way. But that is when I did truly see, like, I was somebody that was a star worker, you know, like I don't like that term when I think about it. I don't want to be a star worker, but I was. I just was, because I wasn't somebody that was trying to bullshit people. I never did that. That was never what I was into. That's never what I wanted. That's never the kind of thing I was good at doing, was bullshitting people or whatever. I was just honest about my lack of skills, or my ignorances, or my lack of knowledge, or whatever. If I couldn't help somebody, I would tell them, or I would try to get them help in some other ways, or the best I could, and all that shit. But I did good, but then I saw other people that were completely incompetent, that were in higher paying, let's just say higher paying positions. And that's just for various reasons. It's like, hey, somebody might have had some other shit, or they bullshitted there in the interview. They said they know this, but they really don't, and all that kind of crap. So I started out at like the lowest rung, like a level 1 position of these maintenance things for robotics or whatever. Even though by the end I realized that I should have been like a level 3, because I was much more, like the highest of that kind of level, because I was much more competent than most of the people I worked with, and I was much more willing to learn, as well as willing to do work and get things done in a way that made sense or whatever, or admit that I don't know something, that kind of shit. But from that, I noticed that how like all these places kind of work, basically, is that most of the people don't know anything, and then there's a few people that do know what they're talking about. Like this one guy that I worked with, his position was a control systems technician. This guy Tyrone, and dude, this guy, he fucking knew his shit. He knew his shit, and I was like, this is the kind of guy that you'd go to when nobody else could have helped you or some shit, because he actually knew what he was doing. But that's kind of like the crux of the issue, is that there is so many people, the vast majority, just like, how it works just with everything. The vast majority don't know anything, completely useless. And then there's like one small percentage, one flat number of people, of workers, people, whatever, that actually know what they're doing and can help you. And that's what I experienced with like all the supervisor positions and the managers and all that shit. I mean, Amazon, they did that, I'm pretty sure, because they just made so many of their people supervisors, mostly like younger people as well, just because then they didn't have to pay them overtime. I guess they didn't have to give them overtime, because they paid them a salary. So if they needed them to stay longer, and which they did, they wouldn't be paying them overtime. So they could just be like, oh yeah, you get all these benefits, but really they just got fucked. But of course they did mostly to younger people, like around my age, because they knew they were very naive, and they'd be like, oh wow, a supervisor position, that sounds great, and then you're really just getting fucked. But there was a fair amount of competent people at Amazon. Like I'd say the proportions were more skewed towards, were skewed more in the competent side than most of the places that I encountered. So I'll give it that. There was a fair amount of, to some extent, there was a fair amount of people that were competent compared to completely incompetent. But then when I went to this other job, at this cardboard factory, I mean, that was actually the reason I kind of left, is because they poached me or whatever, I headhunted or whatever. I had a recruiter, and I was just thinking, I was like, man, this JLL, they're not gonna promote me, and I'm not gonna get paid better. So I'm just like, fuck it, man. Even though I kind of, I mean, any job sucks, but I didn't like the place enough to be like, all right, I'm not gonna take this pay increase kind of thing. So I said fuck it and just jumped. And I was seeing the writing on the wall anyway. I was seeing the places getting more fucked up as time went on, and I was like, there's no way we're gonna be able to keep up with this like maintenance schedule crap with the way we got it now. So I just said, yeah, fuck this. Then I went to this other company. What was it? International Papers, cardboard company, and it was also much closer by. So that was a big up as well, that I didn't have to drive as far every day. Big plus. But this place was like, oh man, there was a lot of pretty, at least on the night shift, there was a lot of pretty cool people, pretty chill. That's usually how it was. The night shift, there was just like a lot of pretty laid back people, which I guess is to be expected when most people are probably tired as fuck and don't even want to be there. It's like, oh god. But yeah, there was there was definitely a much bigger proportion of just incompetence, I'd say, overall. Especially in the supervisors and managers positions kind of thing. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess I can't really, it was just like the same shit. Like, just, they were hired not because of anything or any skills, but more hired because of their ability to be compliant more than actually useful or competent at what they did. Just be compliant. And obviously that's probably a pretty obvious trait that these companies would want. They don't want somebody who's like actually independent, an asset, somebody that will probably most likely leave or whatever. They just want somebody who is a follower, a good somebody who's going to follow the rules, follow their bullshit, as well as be afraid of going against the grain or stupid commands that they get or whatever from their higher ups. I mean, I worked there about a year, and I experienced the same shit. And ironically, the incompetence became even more and more like significant or noticeable as their rank got higher. Like the plant owner was the plant manager or whatever. He was a complete fucking moron, but he was there because of, I'm sure, nepotism as well as his ability to be compliant and comply and all that crap. He was just a fucking piece of shit. And then from that, hearing now my dad, I mean, I would always hear these things, but I wouldn't really think about them much. But hearing his own experiences in his job, I worked there for a little while, but now even like recently, him working there, the amount of incompetence and bullshit that he has to deal with from his coworkers, his supervisors, his managers. Like, really, ironically, the people that he works with, his supervisors, many of them, or a surprising amount of them, are illiterate. Like, they can't even read. And, they won't, like, straight out just say that. Most people that are illiterate won't admit that. They just try to hide it. But then, anybody with a little bit of a perception score on their stat sheet can pretty much tell pretty quickly, like, oh, okay, this person doesn't fucking know how to read. Okay, and it's like, hey, man, fair enough, but if you are not willing to admit that, then that's on you completely, and then I just can say, hey, well, you're a fucking asshole. Whatever happened to you, you didn't want to learn, and you didn't want to get through your fears to learn. So that's on you. Now you have to be the fucking guy who can't read kind of shit. But he's worked with a surprising amount of people in his company and in his daily job that are completely illiterate. Well, I don't know about completely, but are illiterate. They can't read. And are ignorant in so many other ways. But from what I've noticed, from what he talks about, it's like, yeah, it's just it's the same thing I experience everywhere else. It shouldn't be too surprising there, right? These patterns and everything. But, yeah, they hire them. That's kind of the main point I guess I'm trying to make, is that they don't hire people and they don't promote these people. They don't put these people in positions that make sense, like people that are competent and stuff. These positions of quote-unquote power or fake power, especially like the supervisors and the manager positions, I'm not saying that if you're a manager or anything, that you are in the completely like 100% this is how it works, but this is the vast majority. That's the point I'm making. They're hiring them to be compliant, and unquestioningly follow orders. I guess you could say unquestioningly follow orders, as well as they are aware of their own incompetence and ignorance, or they're insecure about it. So they are afraid to do those things. They're afraid to question. They're afraid to not take an order and such, or follow an order. So they basically want the most, as well as people that are, weirdly enough, people that are like financially destitute especially, or people that are like have physical problems or health problems, whatever, mental problems in some cases. People that are desperate. They want people that are desperate and compliant. Even if they don't have any skills, it doesn't matter, because they kind of just fill in those skill gaps with other people, and they just kind of like, they cycle through them, I guess. They cycle through them because, I mean, why would those competent people stay if they have any self-respect? Why would they stick around? And at least in my case, that I didn't, and I just kind of dropped out of the workforce in general. But yeah, that's kind of the thing. Like, obviously the system, or the reality, whatever, has its own goals and its own things that it wants to do with this. So the things that I'm describing here are just kind of like the first grade kind of like level explanation, I guess you could say, more than what a normie would kind of describe or notice, but or make conclusions about, but definitely not obviously the end goal or whatever. But this is kind of what I've noticed, is that, yeah, it's just kind of, they hire these people in these positions, not because they know what they're doing, just because they follow orders, they are compliant, and they are desperate. Desperate is perfect, because that makes you more compliant, because you're less, you don't think you have any way other than that, so you're going to be like, alright, I'll come every day, I won't even plan on quitting, I'll stay here 40 years, because I don't have anywhere else, no one else would hire me. That's what these people, I would imagine, that's what they see in themselves, if they're actually honest. So that's why they get these positions, not because of any qualifications, competencies, skills, any other things, as well as obviously nepotism. That's a factor. That's a pretty big factor, especially in some of these union places I've noticed as well. I had a story about that, but this has gone on pretty long anyway. That I noticed, like, of direct nepotism and shit like that. Which is kind of why I liked Amazon better, because it wasn't union, so there wasn't that kind of as much nepotism feeling or whatever. But, oh man, I should have been walking home while I was doing this, but I was kind of just walking around in the shade. I was going to show some other stuff, but maybe I'll show it in another video, just sort of the stuff I've been doing. As I said, I've been getting more into gardening, and stuff. What is it? I have, some evergreen onion. I don't know why I picked those, but I was like, you know what, these kind of cool. They're like leeks or scallions, whatever name you'd call them, like those kind of long onions, I think, that have the hollow stem, which are good for garnishing and stuff. But they also have like the thinner white root kind of deal. But those have been growing very well in their little potting mixes. Potting mixes, or I guess seedling mixes. And as well as I've had peppermint and spearmint as well. And they might be growing well, but so far I've only actually seen one seedling sprouting for the peppermint in one container. But they're so tiny that for all I know, they could, you know, maybe hopefully when I give it another week or two, hopefully I'll start seeing more activity in those ones. But the evergreen onions have been pretty crazy how much they've been growing just from seedlings in like 2 weeks. As well as just recently I started germinating, or trying to germinate, some peas and beans, like green beans varieties, and two of them have been doing pretty well. This time I tried the plastic bag kind of method, which just involves basically just involves putting the seeds in a plastic bag, putting them on or having a damp paper towel in the bag, keeping it damp, closing the bag, and either putting it in like the bags in the closet, or putting them on the windowsill or whatever. In my case, weirdly enough, is that the ones in the closet have been sprouting the most, germinating the most. But since those germinated, or at least some of them have germinated, about 16, because I did 8 each of these like milk carton pots that I made, milk jug pots that I MacGyvered, whatever you want to say, as planting pots. And I mean, the sprouts looked very good. Like the roots from the sprouts, it was pretty crazy. I was like, wow, it was like 3 days. It's like 3 days that I saw pretty significant germination in some of those seeds. I was like, holy crap, that was fast. And I guess it's easier to see with those because they're pretty big. Like, you know, for seeds, they're pretty damn large compared to, say, the peppermint or the spearmint, which are like, the peppermint were like actually like grains of pepper from like a pepper shaker. It was crazy how small they were. And I put those ones that were looking good in a pot, and I'll see how those start growing. I'm sure they'll be. And I put them on my windowsill. I didn't put them outside or anything yet. And I also, I bought some vanilla beans on Amazon. You know, like the actual vanilla beans pods. And I put those in 2 mason jars. What was it? 50 of them. 50 pods or whatever. 50 like 6-inch pods or whatever. And I put those, all 50, I put 25 in one 32-ounce mason jar, and then the other 25 in another 32-ounce mason jar. And then I filled those 2 up to the brim after that point with vodka. And in 2 or 4 or 6 months, that vodka will have extracted the flavor from those vanilla beans and will have become essentially vanilla extract that you'd have at the store for like baking and stuff. You know, that shit that you get in like 32 milliliter, like tiny little bottles for like $4 or $5 or whatever. What the fuck did I have? I had 2 32-ounce jars. So I took the whole bottle of vodka, and I was like thinking, there's no way this is going to fill. There's no way this is going to fill these 2 bottles or whatever. Empty this, and it fucking did. I was like, holy shit. Fucking, that was 1,750 milliliters of vodka that filled 2. I mean, obviously, that's how math should work. 32 ounces or, you know, half of that or whatever. But yeah, I used the entire 1.75 liter bottle of vodka and filled those 2 bottles. So it's going to be a whole shit ton of vanilla extract. But then the idea is that, I think I already talked about this in my last video, but that after about 6 months, when the flavor has sufficiently been concentrated in the solution, I can take that out, use that just as vanilla extract, and then top that off again with more vodka, and then just keep coming back whenever I need it for more extract. And supposedly for vanilla beans, you can almost do this for like indefinitely with the same beans almost. Like maybe every once in a while you put like a few more in there, fresh ones. But like, that's why they call them forever vanilla or forever vanilla extract or whatever. But I don't know. Pretty cool, once again, how just simple these things that we take that we just assume are like massively complicated to make and everything. It's like, no, it's just simple. It's just a few things in time. Well, no, I'm almost home. But I guess that's what I wanted to talk about, that ramble at the end. But yeah, that's Post Nostalgos' video, as well as Billy or Stardust Simulations stuff. I wanted to just put my input, personal input, and lived experience about that. But yeah. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.